Can just stop now. I'm Tom Wilson. I'm at the Assassination Records Review Board with M.S. Sullivan and Mr. Horn. Mr. Rick Russo has requested to sit in on the session, and they have agreed to let him do that. It's my understanding that any materials that I leave here today will be put into the JFK Act. I have everything written down. I will give a copy of my written presentation to the ARRB. I have an opening statement right now. First off, I want to thank you, Doug and Eileen, very much for having me here. I realize that this is the sunset of the ARRB, but I think that you've been a very good organization, and I appreciate you having me before the last quarter's over. I did invite Senator Specter to come to this meeting. I had a telephone call from Mr. Specter's office day before yesterday. The gentleman that was going to attend has said that he could not be here today, but he would like me to send any records that I can from this meeting to Senator Specter after the meeting, which I will do so. Okay. My first contact with the Assassination Records Review Board came in Dallas, Texas on November 18, 1994. I appeared as a voluntary witness before the entire board at the public hearing. My testimony is in the published record. On October 29, 1996, I received a telephone call from Mr. Horn on behalf of the board. This was in response to Mrs. Marina Porter's and my letter to them with a copy of our letters to President Clinton seeking help in bringing my evidence to the government. On October 31, 1996, I received a letter from Mr. T. Jeremy Gunn, then General Counsel and Associate Director for Research and Analysis for the board. He offered to make time available for a presentation of my data and conclusions. Also, if I wanted to arrange a separate meeting with Department of Justice officials, the board would send a representative if they were permitted to do so. Since then, I have been attempting to give my evidence consisting of artifacts, records, documents, testimony, data, and conclusions to the board on the condition that the multitude of evidence first be received by the proper government agency. After review with the chain of custody unbroken and processed, then and only then, I wanted to give it to the archives for future generations to see and understand. That is the only reason we did not meet, and to date you do not have my full presentation. I understand you are not an investigative body and you are bound by the rules of the JFK Act enacted in 1992. I wanted to meet with the full board, but was told I must first review all of my materials with the staff. They would then determine if my material was worthy of future meetings. So today, I have agreed to meet with the staff and agreed to give an overview of my materials. M.S. Sullivan has informed me that on September 30th, 1998, the board will sunset, and due to the lateness of the date, neither the details of my overview presentation nor any materials I leave will be included in the board's final report. However, I understand that any materials I leave today, along with the original audio recording of this presentation, will become a permanent part of the JFK collection at the National Archives. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I want to thank you for this opportunity to present an overview. In order to minimize the staff time, I will present the following format. I will present a 40-minute videotape that I prepared in 1996. It is a pictorial overview addressed to the layman with no technical or medical expertise and addresses what I have been doing since 1988 in my attempt to bring the truth to the American people. I intend to show this uninterrupted and without additional comment. I will then describe in overview fashion the key points of each of the categories described within the tape. I will provide a listing of the materials that I have, such as artifacts, data, records, and so forth, within each of the 9 category years, 1988 through 1996. Since the board released the medical and autopsy records on July 31st, 1998, I have had an opportunity to review these records. I will comment on my review and how my records correlate with the board's records. I then will give a comment on the staff report that accompanied the release of these records. Following my final statement, and if time permits, I will answer any questions you may have pertaining to or clarifying any of my statements. Is that agreeable?
Sounds good.
Okay. First off, I have a videotape, and I'd just like to describe basically what it'll be about, and we'll play it if we may. It's described as an 8-year quest for the truth in your JFK assassination. Everything that I show you today, or everything I say I have, has not been, nor will be done for commercial purposes. It has been done as a private citizen hoping to bring the truth of the assassination to the public's attention. The video you're about to see is an assemblage of separate but interrelated events that document an 8-year study, starting with an accidental finding in the assassination scene of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. The video was not produced for the commercial media, but to convey to those viewing it an understanding of what has transpired during my 8-year quest for the truth. And being in business for many years, this is just an aside, I know that your attention span is usually 10 minutes, so there's a little bit of entertainment in here, but and that's the reason, so no one would fall asleep. I'm being a salesman. The hardware and software system I used was initially designed for industrial purposes. It uses the science of photonics, the measurement of light. Reflected light is spatial. It occupies space. It can be measured, and with the appropriate vision system, display all the spatial information stored within the image. This display will be visible to the human eye and will expand the human gray level sensing from 30 shades of gray to 256 shades of gray, with all possible combinations. The original image stored within the occupied space, and this is very important, will not be altered. In the following video, the science of photonics follows President John F. Kennedy from November 22nd, 1963, when he was a living, vibrant president, through his assassination, autopsy, and ultimately his images and physical clothing located in the Kennedy Deed of Gift in the National Archives. When I held the clothing in my arms, I cannot tell you how that affected me. And that is what has been keeping me going. This man deserves a proper medium of what happened. That's an aside. In the beginning, there will be a short span of audio, then audio and video. I have also included for the board 2 small overview segments for this presentation. The first one details how the artifacts I produced showing the actual wounds to the president's head were assembled. The second segment shows how I was able to take processed images into the archives for absolute comparison and evaluation with the original Deed of Gift materials. Since I will not be able to leave the videotape with you at this time, although I fully want the JFK Act to have this and the multitude of images I have, I would suggest you tape the audio portion and as you do the video, and Doug, I understand that will automatically happen. Is that correct?
We're taping the audio now.
Yes, but when you show the video, that audio will be taped through the microphones?
The audio from the videotape that you brought will be recorded on the tape.
Fine, so you will have that audio, and I think you should. This way you will have my verbal description on record in the JFK collection. So here's the videotape, and I'll just be quiet for 40 minutes and let you look at it. Please don't fall asleep.
We can do better than 10 minutes.
Is that television on your side on?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Now, where's the volume remote? You know, it was here.
It's over here.
Okay, thanks.
If you have any comments, when I go back later, I'm sure I'll answer any questions you may have.
Okay.
People have asked me, why are you doing this? My answer has been the same to all. This is for you, your children, and their children's children. Our president has been murdered, the assassin is still at large, and America has not been told the truth. It's that simple. Our Constitution demands that our government must pursue evidence that can prove what really happened on November 22nd, 1963. Hello, I'm Tom Wilson, the developer of the image processing system. Using state-of-the-art cameras, lighting, and computers, the system is able to strip away the layers of an image, much the way you would peel away the layers of an onion. Without altering or changing in any way the content of the image, items within are revealed that cannot be perceived by the naked eye. In this example, a flaw in metal strip called a dent is found by peeling away the image layers until only the dent remains, isolated and can be seen by the viewer. The dent can then be identified, located, and its physical characteristics determined. Another example is finding contaminant within chewing gum, such as wood and hair. In this pizza example, the technology is used as a quality control tool. Is the top layer of cheese uniform and doesn't have the correct number of pepperoni pieces? In 1988, quite by accident, the image processing system revealed within the Mary Moorman photograph, as shown on television, two individuals on top of the steps on the grassy knoll, a shooter behind the picket fence, and a witness standing on the top level of the steps in front of the shooter. As the layers of the image were peeled, I was able to identify the facial features of the shooter down to his left eye and a mole on his left cheek. The witness was also identified. In 1989, after my initial finding of the shooter, I continued image processing of other images shown on television. Mr. Zapruder, standing in front of the pagoda opposite Mary Moorman, captured the fatal headshot in his movie. Peeling away the layers of movie frame 313, the image revealed a massive exit wound in the top right rear portion of the president's skull. You can see the loss of scalp and skull and down into the brain. The measurement of the wound shows the incoming missile came from the right front of the president. With the findings from the Moorman and Zapruder images, I went to Dallas in November 1990 to verify the exact locations of the figures within the images. Collecting the data, I returned home and found that the president, Mary Moorman, Mr. Zapruder, the shooter, and the witness did not fit in the overall scene. I had to find out why the coordinates were wrong. I designed optical reflectors and, with the help of two assistants, returned to Dallas in December of 1990. Using the concrete wall as the focal point, the assistants took the positions of the president, Mary Moorman, Mr. Zapruder, the man halfway up on the steps, the shooter, and the witness in front of the shooter. The new exact data revealed the locations were all correct, but proved that the shooter behind the picket fence did not fire the fatal headshot. There had to be another shooter in the right front of the president, the true assassin. In 1992, I received additional images purported to be of the president's autopsy. I say purported because I had no way to verify they were authentic and original. One photo shown here revealed through image processing non-human material on the face of the cadaver in the photograph. In order to establish beyond any doubt, I performed an image processing study of restorative art on cadavers. This study included the materials and techniques involved. Using certified images from a professional source, I studied the cadavers of cancer victims, burn victims, and accident victims. As in my other examples of the technology, the wax here being put on this cadaver stands out as a separate non-human item, just as my example of a dent flaw in a piece of steel. As the cadaver is modified through wax and other materials, it returns to normal form in the eye, ear, and nose. Only the ability to strip away the layers of the image reveals that non-human materials have been used on a human cadaver. As we view the restorative work that has been performed on the purported president's autopsy photograph and make comparison with the other cadavers with known restorative artwork, you can see with your own eyes how the finished product is the same in all cases. The study has also proven how quickly a total human face ravaged by cancer can be restored to a normal-looking state by a restorative art professional. This study was time-consuming and very difficult, but it was necessary and has proven beyond any doubt that the purported autopsy photograph of the president was taken after restorative work had been performed on the cadaver. During 1993, I conducted additional image processing on other purported autopsy photos, some of which you see here. The photo designated F1 reveals a missile entry wound to the president in the right temporal area, as well as non-human material on the face. The photo designated F8 is the photo of a skull with the brain removed. It also shows a missile entry wound to the right front temporal area. The anterior-posterior skull X-ray shows how darkening a copy and/or enhancing an original can hide many of the skull's revealing images. Image processing allows the skull image to show that, in fact, a massive exit wound exists in the top rear of the skull, as well as the missile entry hole in the right front temporal area. The lateral skull is subject to much enhancing manipulation, but also reveals definitive information about what happened. Altogether, the total study of all the purported autopsy materials I used proved one thing: restorative work was done on the cadaver, a missile entry wound in the right front temporal area, and a massive exit wound in the top right rear portion of the skull. The images I used in 1993, some of which you are viewing here, are copies. They contain significant detail. I could not make a public statement about my findings in 1993 because I had no way to prove the origin of the copies, and of course, my findings on the autopsy were based upon these images. One thing that shows the power of image processing is the way the very dark anterior-posterior skull X-ray reveals to the naked eye all of the deformities to the skull from the front to the back and proves the missile entered at the president's right front temporal area. Why is this? The human eye can only see about 30 shades of gray. In other words, only 30 blocks from black to white. The image processing system can see 256 individual shades of gray, 256 individual blocks from black to white, or any combination therein. I said before that going through the layers of gray was like peeling an onion. Carl Sandburg, the renowned poet, has written, "Life is like an onion. You peel it off one layer at a time, and sometimes you weep When I peeled away the layers of the autopsy photographs and x-rays and saw what really happened to President Kennedy that day, I cried. In 1994, the pristine copy of the Mormon photograph I obtained as chain of evidence becomes the ultimate visible proof of the massive exit wound in the rear of the president's head. Chain of evidence means that since the photograph copy's inception, a record is made of exactly who handled it, and it can be proven. Unlike the Mormon copy that has been shown in publications and the media all over the world, with a solid black rear of the president's head, the pristine copy allows the viewer with the naked eye to see the massive rear head exit wound that it does exist immediately after the fatal headshot. You can also see without the aid of a computer that the missile fragmented into two pieces within his skull. Because of its clarity, this photo allowed me to scan the wound similar to a medical CAT scan, obtain 6,000 points of data, and physically construct a model of the wound, the flow of forces in to out, right to left, and calculate the amount of displaced head material. This is the proof there was no entrance wound in the president's rear head. It was an exit wound. In 1995, the unaltered images processed from the Zapruder and Mormon movie and photo allowed me to exactly position them to an anatomical model known as ADAM. ADAM stands for Animated Dissection of Anatomy for Medicine. It is recognized as an authentic duplication of the human anatomy and is endorsed by former Surgeon General Koop. You can see that when the unaltered processed images of the massive rear head exit wound are placed on Adam's head, it is apparent to the layperson that the exit wound exists in exactly the way all of the medical personnel in Dallas described it on November 22, 1963, and in subsequent media interviews. Now, scientific and medical evidence agree on the only conclusion that can be reached. A shooter in the storm sewer at the bottom of Elm Street, located low and to the right front of the president, fired a missile that entered the president's head in the right front temporal area, fragmented in two pieces within the skull, and blew a massive exit hole in the top rear of the head. In August 1995, a witness came forward with testimony about what happened during President Kennedy's autopsy at Bethesda, Maryland. The interviews were conducted in 3 separate sessions. In order not to influence the witness's statements, the first session involved looking at the purported autopsy photos and x-rays you see here. Only the witness's recounting of what happened during that night of November 22, 1963 was recorded. This session resulted in 39 pages of testimony. The second session in September 1995 involved the same photographs. I also gave the witness input as to my findings on the same photographs. I asked many questions, trying in vain, as it turned out, to find contradictions in the testimony. I told the witness before the session started I had received permission to view the original photos and x-rays in the archives. Knowing I would be able to check the statements, the witness never wavered and was consistent throughout the session. This session resulted in 29 pages of testimony. The third and final session was held in November 1995, after I returned from viewing the deed of gift in the archives. I was able to verify and prove by examining all of the evidence in the archives that the witness was telling the truth and that the photographs we reviewed prior to the last session were in fact copies of some of the material I saw. The witness testimony has shown that he performed services directly related to assassination evidence. He viewed the massive exit wound in the back of the head. He saw President Kennedy prior to the assassination, so the president's features were known to him, and this was for comparison purposes. He left his personal mark on the autopsy evidence. He questioned some of the findings during the autopsy to no avail. He produced verifiable details that conflict with the government investigation. Prior to visiting the archives, I prepared findings through image processing of the purported autopsy photographs. Some of the photos and x-rays used were the anterior, posterior, and lateral x-ray, the full face of the president, and the skull flap. You can also see some of the images I processed and took to the archives for comparison. I had received permission to view the original x-rays and photographs and other artifacts known as the deed of gift from Professor Bart Marshall of Yale University, acting on behalf of the Kennedy family. I was able to view, inspect, and compare all of the materials, including the president's clothing. Looking at the original materials, I became more determined than ever to prove how this president lost his life, struck down by a multiplicity of shooters. As you view a summary of my findings in the archives, you can understand that this original evidence cannot be disputed, since it has been guarded since its inception. Now that I had acquired the last piece of evidence, all of the materials were correlated and summarized. This provided factual, hard evidence to establish the truth and stand up to all scrutiny. It gave me detailed information where statements were correct, new evidence, conflicting statements, evidence to prove statements in error, and where evidence was altered, either intentionally or otherwise. The items used for this correlation are shown here. And now, in 1996, the last part of the equation, technology triggers the truth, shows that 8 years of work can be summed up in seconds. The assassin is still at large. A conspiracy existed to kill the president. Multiple shooters inflicted the wounds. The assassin fired from the right front. Government officials lied, distorted, and/or disregarded original evidence. Evidence was altered. Assassination images were altered. Investigating panels have reached erroneous conclusions based on distorted evidence and false testimony.
And now there'll be the short segments I put in for today's meeting,
Okay.
for a better understanding.
Okay.
Only the pristine copy of the Mary Moorman photograph allowed the computer scan to measure the exact area and flow of forces that traversed the president's head as the missile entered his right front temporal area, fragmented into two parts, and exited out the top rear portion of his head. As you can see, the dark Mormon photo that has been shown to the public reveals nothing. You must remember the original photo was a Polaroid with the president's head only a small portion of the overall scene. Also of importance is the fingerprint you see in the lower right corner. The pristine copy of the photograph allows the image to be enlarged with the optical details still intact. An overlay of the Mormon photo shows the area of the president's head involved with the rear exit wounds. First, I had to collect 6,000 data points using the computer to give me the X, Y, and Z, or depth information. I then had the computer prepare a chart from the numerical data. The chart you see here is 6 inches wide by 14 feet long. This is how much data was obtained from the pristine Mormon photo, from the rear of the president's head, no larger than the tip of your little finger. I then had to take each source of the scan, have the computer print out a page for each slice, then physically cut out each template in order to have the material left in the head and the material removed from the head by the missile. The result, as you can see here, looking at the model generated from physically combining all the slices, shows the material removed from the rear of the president's head. Remember, the president is lying with his head tilted toward Jackie. That is why in this view the model seems horizontal. The two fragments are shown on the model, and in the close-up you can see the exact path and exit of the right and left fragments through the top of the head. A separate plastic mold was constructed to measure by volume the amount of material removed from the wound by the exiting missile fragments. This amount was 36% of the wound in the top rear of the president's head, just as the doctors in Dallas and the autopsy witness described. A latex mold was also constructed to measure the flow of forces, the direction from in to out, the angular displacement of head material, and also to provide a master mold to physically produce a plaster mold of the size and shape of the head material from the scalp into the wound, and also to determine the entry point based on the exiting point's convergence within the skull. When the template from the latex mold is placed on the enlarged Mormon overlay, you can see the location of the exit wound. Now we can place the mold templates on the anatomical model Adam. We can raise Adam up from the tilted position, the president, and show you how the wound would look in the vertical head. The Zapruder image, processed from another angle, shows how the wounds are the same from two camera positions 180 degrees apart. This frontal view of Adam shows how both the entry point and the exit point would look if you could see through the head. Adam's cross-section view of the skull shows the entry and 4 exit wound points, and finally the last view shows how the incoming missile came from a low point in the president's right front. All of this came from the computer scan of the pristine Mormon photograph.
There's one more small segment.
This is a brief video showing how image processing with computer analyses can reveal to the human eye the fatal damage to President Kennedy's head.
The autopsy performed at Bethesda Naval Hospital used a portable X-ray unit. The anterior-posterior, or number 1 X-ray, had the film under the back of the head and the X-ray source tube at the front of the head, hence the term AP X-ray number 1.
This is the JFK exhibit F55, identified as an anterior-posterior blow-up. Notice how dark this enhanced X-ray is. All of the detail of the skull damage is hidden. This is the JFK exhibit F56, also identified as an enhanced image of the AP X-ray. This exhibit is very close to the original number 1 X-ray in the deed of gift in the archives. In the committee meeting to the House of Representatives in 1978, it is stated these exhibits were cropped to show the public, but the original X-rays were used to verify the authenticity and accuracy of these cropped counterparts. As the image processing system starts to peel away the layers of gray from the anterior or face of the skull, the human eye can see significant detail as the images go deeper down to the posterior or rear of the skull. Notice in the upper left-hand corner of the skull as you view it in the rectangular area, it is becoming more pronounced and a specific shape is being formed. This is the area of the skull that is missing in the President's right rear occipital region. This is the area that has been blasted out from the fragmentation of the missile entering his right front temporal region. Now this area turns black as the layers are removed all the way to the rear of the skull. The area is black because the skull is lying on the X-ray cassette film and there is no skull left in this area. When all the layers are removed, the missing skull is defined. The fractured right orbit is also defined, showing why the President's right eye has been damaged internally, and also a large artifact is observed where the right eye should be. A three-dimensional image is produced by the computer using the numerical data compiled from the layers of gray. You can observe the portions of skull remaining, the missing portions, and the artifact on the top of the right eye. This is just one of the pieces of evidence to prove the American people have not been told the truth about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. Documents used to verify the authenticity and correlation of all the evidence are the Warren Commission Report 1964, transcripts of hearings before the Medical Panel of Select Committee on Assassination 1978, Report to Select Committee on Assassination U.S. House of Representatives 1978, Report of Photographic Evidence Panel 1979, Interview with Witness to the Autopsy 1995, and viewing the original JFK deed of gift autopsy artifacts in 1995.
That's the end of the video. We didn't fall asleep, thank you.
No.
Okay, now what I'd like to do is I'd like to go back and just give some key points for each of the items in the video and tell you my interpretation of what I have, how it fits within, hopefully, the mandate of the Assassination Records Review Board. Would you like to continue right now and take a break, or?
I'm okay.
Okay,
You
I'm
let
okay.
me know if you need
All
a
right.
break,
Okay.
and we'll do
All
the
right,
same.
thank you.
Yeah, just a second, Tom. Just
Oh,
look at this.
I'll save my questions for the end because you might answer them.
Yeah, and I think this will expedite the meeting and
Right.
whatever.
We're all set, go ahead.
Okay? In November 1988, a vision system I had designed for industrial purposes was being tested in my office. It was the last and final phase before trial runs in the factory. The purpose of the real-time system was to automatically detect and identify flaws in high-speed metal products. The system utilized photonic principles throughout. The optical device, a charge-coupled array camera, provided 250,000 simultaneous pieces of input with 256 full frame gray levels every 1/30th of a second. I had done extensive testing of this new filmless technology, and the potential was unlimited. The image processing computer that distributed the data was state-of-the-art. In 1988, many government agencies were using the same type and model of computer for image processing analyses. I have official documents listing the FBI and NASA as some of the users. I also have hundreds of papers, scientific articles, applications, and other documents stating the approval and practical use of the technology. The Mary Moorman photograph shown on national television was the first non-commercial image I had analyzed. The analysis provided verifiable detailed images of a shooter on the grassy knoll in front of and to the right of the approaching presidential motorcade. The shooter's feature and dress are visible. A witness later identified as Mr. Gordon Arnold, located between the shooter and the motorcade, was also identified in this photograph. My documents and artifacts authenticating this analysis consist of the original image processor and its original hard disk, and it's pretty old right now. The original images embedded on the disk along with videotapes of the same image from various broadcast stations. All were processed with exactly the same results. All processing protocol is documented to allow similar systems to verify and repeat my findings. I also have Polaroid photographs and written reports describing each step of the process. As a record of my findings, I have several raw videotapes which show the real-time processing from the overall finding down to the last bit of gray level attainable within the spatial image. The Zapruder film. After proving that images could be processed, verified, and repeated from the Mary Moorman photograph, regardless of the broadcasting source, I proceeded to analyze all of the Zapruder copy films available through the media and commercial videos. Documentation was generated that proved all images showed the same results. The film was altered. It was discontinuous. Image processing allowed the external wounds to the president to be visible and identifiable. Most important was the finding that the large wound in the right rear occipital portion of his head had been very carefully obscured. All the images I have analyzed to date have all been copied from the same altered film. This leads one to question, is there an original pristine film anywhere? I have many documents, records, and artifacts that deal with my findings in the Zapruder film. The films I have include the so-called original film as sold by the Zapruder family for movies and television shows, and a vintage 8mm movie film that has been transferred to NTSC video. It has the appearance of the Zapruder film as shown at the National Archives. The latest analysis was performed on the new digitized version of the so-called Zapruder original released for sale in 1998. I also have raw video, hard copy photographs, protocol, and data to allow a similar image processing system to duplicate my findings. Lastly, I have records from my attempts to get information from the National Archives as to the origin of the Zapruder films they show to the public. I would now like to comment on the board's call to the public for input as to whether they should purchase the Zapruder film for the American public. I could not attend a televised meeting. However, I did send a written opinion to the board. I informed them my testing of many Zapruder films have proven that none of them are original and have been altered. I suggested that the so-called original Zapruder film should be verified for authenticity before any price is considered. I offered to serve without pay on a team of experts to validate. I do not see why the Zapruder family would object to proper testing to ensure that their film is an original of historical value. If it is not original and is altered, then it too becomes evidence of a conspiracy and obstruction of justice. 1990, a trip to Dallas. The shooter on the knoll did not fire the fatal headshot. The image processing analyses of the Zapruder, Nix, and Moorman images provided the exact location of the president from 3 different vantage points at the time of the fatal headshot. A location plan was designed taking into account all of the structures in Dealey Plaza that were still standing in 1990. The plan using the shooter as a data focal point did not allow the witnesses and the victim to remain in their known locations. Since all locations were verified, it made another shooter from another location fired the fatal headshot. I designed special optical and image processing equipment to physically check all the angles within Dealey Plaza. I returned to Dallas and using the bearings from the location plan, a triangulation of viewer, shooter, and victim was established. Instead of using film frame rates for synchronization of events, I used actual photometric angling from images frozen in time. Human memory and unreliable mechanical devices such as the camera used by Zapruder were removed from the equation. This verification of known locations did not reveal where the fatal headshot came from, but did establish that the shot came from the front and was not fired by the shooter on the knoll. My records of this time period consist of the data, maps, actual optical equipment used in the test and confirmation through photographs used in the testing in Dealey Plaza. A video was prepared showing all findings to date. This video is called Montage of Conspiracy and documents the findings. This video belongs in the archives as a true testimonial of the assassination of President Kennedy. And as an aside, I'd like to say that none of the films that I'm talking about have ever been made for commercial purposes, will ever be sold. They are only based on the fact of the evidence I have, and I fully intended to give them to the archives once the proper government agency evaluates them. Restorative art on cadavers in 1992. Photographs of the body of President Kennedy were given to me by concerned citizens who requested an evaluation of the actual condition of the cadaver. As an aside, I'd like to say that I believe these citizens are very well known and their reputations are not in dispute. The visual condition of his face, eyes, and head did not show any of the damage that the Zapruder and Moorman images had shown. In order to ascertain the dramatic difference in the two types of images, I undertook an extensive study of restorative art as performed on cadavers by licensed morticians. I had the Zapruder and Moorman images as my known artifacts. A video prepared by a major supplier of restorative art materials was used as the model for materials. As in my industrial image processing of metal, food, forensic, and yes, pizza, the identity of materials from cause and effect had to be isolated. The study involved image processing of the entire restorative art process in real time. It was performed on victims of cancer, burns, and accidental death. The materials isolated and identified were human materials such as skin, eyes, hair of a cadaver. The restorative materials such as wax, powder, artificial devices, and other cosmetic materials were also isolated. The result of the study produced verification that some photos of the president's body are not autopsy photos as some witnesses have expressed. They are photos of President Kennedy after restorative work was performed on his cadaver, hiding the damage shown in other photographic artifacts. I have all the records of the study, the photographic images used in the study, and the authentication of the restorative materials and procedures. My videotapes and hard copy photographs show the entire head and face area of the president that was reconstructed. The times required to perform the services are documented. This study is a valuable record to prove whether a photograph of a cadaver is in effect the natural condition of the body or if it has been altered. The memory of a witness many years later no longer becomes pertinent to the truth. Photograph and X-ray analyses 1963. Purported autopsy photographs and X-ray. Photographs purported, and I emphasize purported, to be authentic autopsy photographs of President Kennedy were given to me in 1993 from credible sources familiar with the various government studies of his assassination. Some of these credible witnesses were involved in the investigation. Without assuming any validity of the images, I proceeded to do a complete analysis of each of the images. By processing each image through the entire range of the imaging optics and computer protocol, I was able to determine and authenticate the following in 1993. Number one, the images are of President Kennedy. Number two, some of the images have had restorative art performed on the cadaver. Number three, non-human materials have been inserted within the skull. Number four, some of the photographs show an entrance wound in the right front temporal area and an exit wound in the right rear occipital area. Number five, some of the images were photographed before and after the Y incision was made. Number six, some of the images have been altered, and I mean photographically altered. Number seven, the AP and right lateral X-rays show the entrance wound in the right front temporal area and an exit wound in the right rear occipital area. Number eight, the metal fragments in the skull and their trajectory from front to back are verified. Number nine, the beveling of the skull wound shows entrance at the front of the skull and exited the right rear occipital portion of the skull. And number 10, brain tissue was not observed while processing the skull x-rays from the front to the rear. This indicates the brain had been removed from the skull prior to taking the x-rays. The materials I have consist of purported autopsy photographs and x-rays from 2 sources and complete image processing records and videos validating the findings. I also have transparencies of various levels of the skull showing the level and fragmentation of the missile as it entered the right front temporal area and exited the right rear occipital area. I have a video entitled Electronic Autopsy. It shows all of the above findings, and it belongs in the archives as a witness testament. The pristine Mary Moorman photograph, 1994. And this is the most important artifact your board could ever have. I received a negative of the Mary Moorman Polaroid photograph from a credible source. This negative was copied directly from the original shortly after it was taken at the assassination scene on November 22, 1963. It has been contained as chain of custody and certified as such. This certified copy was done before any deterioration of the original Polaroid. This genuine artifact is of major historical importance and provides for all Americans the opportunity to finally see firsthand the truth of the conspiracy and cover-up. This photograph shows to the naked eye a massive exit wound in the right rear occipital area of the president's head. It is the same wound obscured in the Zapruder film. It is not darkened as shown in publications all over the world. You do not need a computer or even a magnifying glass to see the wound government investigations have sworn under oath never happened. This photograph is not a forgery, has not been altered, and is the one major piece of evidence of a conspiracy and cover-up in President Kennedy's assassination. The shooter on the knoll and Mr. Gordon Arnold are located within ease in this artifact. Because of the exceptional clarity of the image, I was able to perform an image processing scan of the massive exit wound. The finite quality of data obtained permitted 3-dimensional molds to be made. One mold shows the exit wound in the skull and the damage the missile did within the skull as it fragmented into 2 pieces. Another mold using the same data shows the amount and configuration of the material blown out the back of the head. The third mold measures the exact percentage of material the exiting fragments removed from the rear portion of the skull. And as an aside, you might look back into the doctor's testimony that you just released and see how much percentage of the skull, 4 or 5 years after I said this, what they thought was removed from the back of the skull. The scan data, the 3-dimensional images produced from the scans and the molds produced from the 3-dimensional images provided model to compute and track the missile. The computer track started at the exit wound, went down through the skull, and continued through the right front temple entrance wound to the exact location of the shooter who fired the fatal headshot. So I did it backwards. The materials I have relating to analyses of the Moorman artifact are: 1. Photo prints and copy negatives that are certified with various copy camera settings. This was done to verify the authenticity of the Moorman artifacts. These copy negatives thus become artifacts too. Number 2, a 30-minute self-interview on video detailing the image processing of the Moorman artifact. It details all of the processing techniques that I used. Number 3, many record books of the scans of the artifacts. These records allow the Moorman artifact to be scanned by independent processing systems for proof of repeatability. Number 4, a complete list of trade publications, papers, technical presentations, and television media presentations, all showing the so-called original Moorman Polaroid with the back of the president's head, a large, dark, black area. Many documents of experts describe the Polaroid as before the fatal shot, after the fatal shot, during the fatal shot, and assassination scene. My records, documents, and artifacts prove the original Polaroid seen by government officials and the Moorman artifact given me for analysis have always shown to the naked eye the exit wound in the right rear occipital area of the president's head. I hope the Assassination Records Review Board intends to show in its final report to the President and Congress that it has evaluated and obtained for the JFK Act all materials relating to the most significant artifact of the assassination, the Mormon photograph. I would like to remind the Assassination Records Review Board representatives here today of witness testimony given to the board in Dallas on November 18, 1994. Mr. Gary Mack preceded me in testimony, stating in part, quote, "There is nothing in the record that indicates that the FBI or the Warren Commission ever did anything with her," my comment is the Mormon picture, "of the assassination. It is the only one known to exist at the time of the headshot, and it is astounding to me that a photograph like that could exist, was known to exist within minutes of the assassination, and yet there is no official interest in that photograph as far as the available documentation shows," unquote. I also discussed the same areas of concern in my testimony as a witness following Mr. Mack. In 1995, the image processing data used to construct the head wound molds were sufficient to permit exact placement of an anatomically correct model. I chose Adam because it is endorsed by former Surgeon General Koop. A 45-page formal report of the study was prepared. The actual images of the head wound from the process Zapruder and Mormon analysis were inserted in the correct location on the anatomical model. As an aside, in other words, I did not go in and make graphic details to show these are the actual images that the processing, and then I overlaid them on the anatomical model. So what you see in this book, what I'm going to give you, are the actual wounds derived from the images. That's an aside. Additional model x-rays were used to demonstrate the location of the wound and how it would look if verified by the original JF x-rays. As an aside, I still hadn't seen any originals. I was working on what I thought were purported, and I did not take anyone's word for what they were. In my line of work, I have to find out for myself. You can't rely on people to tell you things because there are a lot of things that are self-serving. So I still hadn't seen them yet. The materials authenticating the study include videos documenting the wounds, along with all process data to show how the original images were placed on Adam. I also have technical reports and papers verifying that the views are anatomically correct. I have a copy of the report with me. As you can see, is detailed and I can easily be correlated with your medical depositions in the medical evidence. I believe it shows very clearly what statements from memory can be validated. I would like to give you this copy. If I may, I'd just like to go up and just show you a few pages of what this consists of so you have a little better understanding. This is still recording, right?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. This was done in 1995. This is Adam, and this is the location of the missile entry. As we go down through Adam, we're going to do a physical, geographical track to see what areas of the inner structure of the head would be affected by this. You can see the frontal lobe, the parietal bone, and so forth and so on. This is an Adam X-ray for location of the missile. Then you can go in and see, now this is an overlay from Mormon. This shows where it became, and you'll notice 36% of the area. I think you're going to find that whoever said around 30% was pretty good without having a computer to tell them. This is the area blown away, and I'm going to give you this, so you know you can. This is Adam again going down through the lateral view. There it is on the X-rays. This is through the top view. This is an MRI scan. Here's where frame 313 looked to me on my image computer as it started to blow away. Then I actually have the scalp fragments in the air from the Zapruder film. I overlaid them, and Adam now becomes President Kennedy in a tilted position. You can see the actual parts of scalp. So what we can say here is what I have on my records that are artifacts. You can actually go in with what I have and actually produce how much scalp was removed during the blowout. Goes in here, and this is the actual way the brain, the skull, and the scalp came out of the Zapruder film. I know this sounds unbelievable, but this is an actual image processed as it went down. There's the brain is processed. There's a map I made a long time ago detailing it. Here's Adam in the back. This is the area, the angle where the bullet came from. That's what the brain would look like, and you have to remember that when you look at the doctor's testimony, remember the cerebellum down in here, who said what. It's very important. Then we go into where the missile was, where it would be when it exited, the fragmentation, and that we have the Moorman and the Zapruder films, two things, two different parts, 180 degrees apart, and they both coincide. And I will give you this when I leave. (1995), the witness. The person actually responsible for taking and developing all of the autopsy x-rays was Mr. Jerrol Custer, a Navy enlisted man. As fate would have it, he resides less than 2 miles from my home. I conducted 3 interviews with Mr. Custer in August, September, and November 1995. The meetings were recorded on audio tape and transcribed in their entirety to establish a certified 116-page affidavit. My interviews were conducted using investigative techniques that were designed to bring out the truth and to avoid embellishment and memory lapse by the witness. If you compare the ARRB staff questioning of the medical witnesses deposed under subpoena starting in 1996, you will find the format of their questioning remarkably similar to mine. The first interview explored Mr. Custer's recollection of the autopsy and the task he performed. The second interview involved how my findings on purported autopsy photographs and and x-rays related to his findings and involvement on November 22nd and 23rd, 1963. The third interview, after I returned from viewing the original Kennedy deed of gift autopsy artifacts in the archives, consisted of showing Mr. Custer how I could validate his statements in the previous 2 interviews. This affidavit is of historical value in that it expands Mr. Custer's recollection and provides proof of his full cooperation at the Assassination Records Review Board deposition meeting. The materials I have to support the affidavit are original audio tapes and notes from the meetings. Mr. Custer's son was present as a witness at all interviews. I also have a workbook record of all purported autopsy photos used for my analyses and interviews prior to going to the archives to study the original. I would like to point out at this time that the Assassination Records Review Board staff has referred to autopsy photos discussed in the medical depositions of subpoenaed witness as the Fox photos. I assume the Assassination Records Review Board has procured a copy of Mr. Mark Crouch's certified affidavit that the Fox photographs are genuine photographs from the JFK autopsy. I have a copy of this affidavit in my records. When Mr. Custer was deposed by the ARRB staff in October 1997, he brought with him our 116-page affidavit protected by copyright. He brought this because your subpoena was intimidating and demanded he bring all materials directly related to the JFK assassination. Basically, he was terrified of the subpoena wording and took everything he had in his possession. The medical and autopsy records released to the public in July 1998 show the front cover of our affidavit. Copyright by Mr. Custer and me is very plain on your exhibit, as well as my serial number WC1295205. I was not asked by the board for permission to copy this document, nor was permission given. I also am very concerned that the staff had this affidavit overnight and had an opportunity to review it before starting Mr. Custer's deposition. This prior knowledge could have allowed the staff to ask selected questions and show selected materials to Mr. Custer that the other autopsy witnesses were not asked or shown. I stated before that Mr. Custer was terrified of the subpoena. An example of his terror is the fact that he did not inform me of the subpoena or the deposition, and that the Assassination Records Review Board had our affidavit until after almost 4 months after the fact. We then held a meeting where we reviewed his entire official corrected deposition. We made an audio recording of the review and statements of what was discussed off record. I have brought a very short summary we made at the conclusion of the review. I would like to play it for you and leave it with you for inclusion in the JFK Act. I have it right here. It's only on one side, Duck, and it's on side A. Believe it or not, I'm not too good with these devices. My wife ends up turning them on, turning them off, but
That surprises me.
she said that's typical engineer.
We'll want to make sure the volume is up as much as we can. I wanna
Whatever
make sure.
you have to do.
There we go. Okay.
Information on this tape is protected by United States copyright laws, all rights reserved, and is the property of Thomas Wilson and Jerrol Custer, 1998. The summary that is recorded on this tape is a summary that was derived between Thomas Wilson and Jerrol Custer, the man that took all of the x-rays at the autopsy of President Kennedy in Bethesda, Maryland on November 22nd, 1963. This summary will give basic information as to why Mr. Custer and Thomas Wilson feel that the truth has not been told in the assassination of President Kennedy. The evidence exists to prove what really did happen, and all we are trying to do is bring this to the government's attention, have it recorded, treat it as chain of evidence, and then give it to the deed of gift. That were held between Tom Wilson and Jerrol Custer, the man that took all of the x-rays in Bethesda the night of November 22nd, 1963. It's March the 28th. We have just concluded reviewing Mr. Custer's deposition that was held at the Assassination Records Review Board, in which he went down under subpoena. And so both Mr. Custer and myself, Tom Wilson, are going to summarize what we believe we know now after a complete review of the Jerrol Custer's visit to the archive. Mr. Custer, would you just like to summarize how you feel about this now?
Well, basically what I'd like to say is I was approached by the Assassination Review Board not once but 3 or 4 different times, and I flat out refuse to come to Washington, D.C. and discuss this in no way, shape, or form. And for some reason they felt that I was that important that they had to get me with a federal subpoena. When I received the subpoena, I felt intimidated, I felt threatened. I thought, my God, what are they trying to do to me here? So I felt the best course of action was to keep my mouth shut and go. And what really surprised me, in the subpoena, they listed particular items that I had that they wanted me to bring along with them. So I packed everything up and I caught a plane and I headed towards Washington, D.C. Here's where I met Mr. Horn, one of the associates of Jeremy Gunn. He seemed like a pretty nice fellow, and he made it quite aware of me that they had limited funds on what they could do and how they could set me up. But if they had such limited funds, then how come they put me in a hotel that cost over $300, particularly each night? And I couldn't get over that. So the next morning we met Jeremy Gunn. We met him in Washington, D.C. He picked us up at a corner. All right, let me back up a little bit. All the information I brought with me from Pittsburgh, Horn took all the information with him that night. And he said, we'd like to take it, look it over, and make some notes, and maybe later on make copies of what you have here. Well, what can I say? No, you can't have it. And I said, sure, take it with you. So he took all the information with him that night, and the next morning he met me about 7 o'clock in the morning in the lobby, and we proceeded to grab the shuttle, and we went into Washington, D.C. to meet Jeremy Gunn. He picked us up right around where the old archives was in Washington, and we headed towards College Park. As soon as I met the man, he had a certain, how can I put it, characteristic about him. He was strictly business up one side and down the other, and He was very observant on everything he said. When he asked you a question, it seemed like he had a particular idea what kind of answer he wanted to receive from you. And he was kind of examining me all the time that I was there, I guess, to find out, well, do I have a dodo bird here, or is this man pretty well educated? Does he know what he's talking about? Or like a preliminary bout before the main event. Well, we finally arrived at College Park, the archives, and we went into the little room. And we started the deposition. At the time, in attendance, it was Jeremy Gunn, Mr. Horn, a transcriber, and another gentleman. And there were two of the employees from the archives that had come into the room with the different x-rays and photographs. This is when Jeremy Gunn showed me different x-rays and different photographs and made me comment on what I had. And at that time, I knew that I had to keep my head on my shoulders and maintain cool about it, because at all times this man was probing and questioning and probing and questioning and trying to switch words around, and it was quite obvious to me at the time, and I figured, well, all right, two can play that game. And many a times I had to back him off, and I called him, Jeremy, listen, this is what I'm trying to explain to you. Well, Tom and I were sitting here this evening. Well, let me back up a little bit. We went through all this, and during the whole situation there in Washington, D.C., I kept thinking, why am I so important? Why do I have to be here? They had all these experts. They showed me enhanced films. Why didn't they show it to the experts? I made that comment to Jeremy. I said, how come? Why am I seeing them? Well, we want to make sure we get the record straight. I said, well, these men are the experts. Aren't they supposed to get the record straight? But you were there. Well, they were there too. So what? We went through the whole situation, and we finished up the deposition like 6 hours later. A couple of times I had to say, well, hey, let's break here a minute. I have to go use the bathroom. Pardon me, you know. Biological urges do come about. And I asked for water, and each time I asked to break, I got the nastiest looks. Like, you know what? We got back into the room, and we finally finished. And he asked me one final question. Well, what do you think of the whole situation? And I turned around to him and said, Jeremy, do you really want to know? First thing he said, we're off the record. I said, what are you actually trying to accomplish here? Oh, we're just trying to get the record straight and put everything away and have it on file. I said, aren't you a judiciary branch? Oh, no. I said, well, what I'm giving you here is evidence. Evidence that something that happened. Well, we're not interested in that right now. Well, Tom and I are sitting here this evening, and we went over my deposition. I found out there's some things that he's seen that I didn't see. The difference in enhancement films were the inventory they had, and I brought this up to Tom a couple of times, that the only reason they would have a black and a white film of a particular body part is to reveal and conceal. Why would they want to reveal, and why would they want to conceal? This has to be right there. It's telling you something. They don't want the public to know what actually happened. The x-rays that I saw that day in Washington, D.C. were my x-rays. That's a true fact. I took them, I developed them, I literally sometimes interpreted them. That's not to say that they can't make different adjustments by making photocopies of such x-rays. This is why they have the white and the black enhancements. Again, reveal and conceal. This has to be. It's right there. It's as plain as the nose on your face. Had to be a conspiracy. Why are they hiding it? They don't want the American public to know that their government has done something drastically wrong. All I can say is, I hope this does get out. Well, another thing, let me say this also. I had an affidavit that was copyrighted. Now, is the government that much higher than the common law, the copyright laws? Can they violate laws and get away with it? Now, if I would violate a copyright law, of course, I'd be penalized. If the government violates the copyright law, will they be penalized? There's the question. There's something you have to answer yourself. Well, all I can say is, what's the bottom line? Who's telling the truth? Who's not telling the truth? I know Tom Wilson and I are telling exactly the way we've seen it. We've been able to correlate between each other what I did, what I saw, where the shot came from. It certainly didn't come from the back. And everybody keeps saying that. It came from the back. It came from the back. All I can do is tell what I know, what I saw, and what I did.
Thank you, Jerry, for your summation of what we've just completed here. Now I'd like to tell you my summary, the way I feel. The Assassination Records Review Board was created quite some time ago. And it was created by Congress because basically the official investigations did not satisfactorily answer the questions raised by the public about the assassination of President Kennedy. The Senate Committee on Governmental Affairs concluded that the creation of a review board was required to ensure an independent and enforceable mechanism for disclosure under uniform standards for review. It also said that the Act required that all assassination records must be opened by the year 2017, with the exception of records certified for continued postponement by the President. Now, I can understand why some things have to remain for the sake of the personnel, but by the year 2017, all of the people that have been associated with either conspiracy, obstruction of justice, or all the other things that have gone on since 1963 will all be out of harm's way. They'll all be deceased. And I think that the evidence that Jerry and I have uncovered through technological, scientific, and actually that he was the person that took all of the x-rays that the entire assassination boards looked at in one form or another. Here is a living witness that is able to put together his story as he used it, as he did it, and it conflicts with the government's proposal of what has happened, and now he feels that it's time to come out to the American public, and so do I. The authority of the Assassination Records Review Board says that they can request the Attorney General to subpoena private persons to compel testimony, records, and other relevant information. Well, Mr. Custer had received several letters, but what he thought that he didn't have anything significant until he received this intimidating subpoena. It was such an intimidating thing that for months he did not even tell me that he had received it and had been down to Washington for a deposition. What kind of a country is this where a citizen that does his job in the service of his country is dragged down to Washington, D.C.? As I look through this deposition and correlate the deposition between what Mr. Custer told me in 1995, before I went into the archives, after I came back from the archives, and after we correlated what I saw in the deed of gift versus what he told, and then he's called down and given this deposition, we've now come to the conclusion that there has been certain things that have been done that are not the American way. The other thing that the Assassination Records Review Board is in their mandate is they are to receive information from the public regarding the identification and public disclosure of assassination records, and hold hearings, administer oath, and subpoena witness and documents. I have been trying to give the Assassination Records Review Board my evidence, and I underline the word evidence, in the assassination of President Kennedy and the correlation of the truth of the x-rays and the deed of gift in the archives. I have asked them that my evidence be contained and taken by the proper government authority after the proper government authority has acknowledged that this is evidence and can change the entire investigation into the assassination of our president. And so, based upon what I have done, what Jerry has told me, what I've been able to correlate and confirm, what he has been able to look at what I have done independently and correlate and confirm, this is the summation that I've arrived at. Evidence in the official reports shown to be different from what exists in the archives and witness testimony. And I underline the word evidence. False statements from the testimony of witnesses to the autopsy. We now have a living witness that was there and took all of the x-rays. You can read his deposition. This is entirely different from what the American people has been told. Copies of the x-rays and so-called enhancements have caused serious, erroneous conclusions to be made by the Warren Commission and the various House Select Committee boards and medical panel exams. They have looked at information that is erroneous and altered. How can they be expected to come to the truth? There was no second set of x-rays taken at the autopsy, as all of the reports show. All of the x-rays were taken by Mr. Custer the night of 11/22/63. As he would take x-rays, he would go off and develop, bring new film down, but there was no second set of x-rays. They were all contiguous. The x-rays in the deed of gift are of President Kennedy. I have been able to establish that scientifically, technically, and through other criteria. Mr. Custer says these are the x-rays that he has taken. We are in total agreement. Therefore, they are the true evidence. There was no brain in the head when the x-rays of the skull number 1, 2, and 3, and incidentally the 2 missing x-rays in the archives that Mr. Custer took, which would have shown additional information, and they were all taken on the night of 11/22/63, and Mr. Custer has testified as such. The archive evidence and materials in the deed of gift prove the fatal missile did not come from the rear top. It came from the right front lobe. I have the evidence to prove it. Mr. Custer and I are willing to go public with this, but the evidence must be taken by the proper government authority, and then I will deed all of my various evidentiary pieces to the deed of gift and the archives so that future generations of American public can see how the truth finally came out, but the evidence must be taken first and the proper authority go after the real people that caused the murder of President Kennedy.
And I might say that this is totally unedited, as you can tell. And when I say about giving my materials to the archives, the computer system that I have that I can verify was and probably still is being used by the FBI and so other government. I want to give the computer, I want to give everything to the archives. I don't want anything to remain in my custody once it's evaluated. You can have this tape when we're done, okay?
Okay.
I think it's rewinding now. Yeah, it's still rewinding. I'll put it in the cassette and then give it to you. Mr. Custer, in my opinion, is a very honest person, This is not in my written notes, but I asked him when he was in my office initially. I interrogated him much harder than Mr. Gunn did, because I wanted to see for myself, you know, what am I dealing with? Am I dealing with factual occurrences and so forth? He had his son there, and I asked him, Jerry, why are you doing this? He said, Tom, I want my son to know the truth. And so his son was at all of the findings that we did, and he is a witness. I thought that was nice. I thought it was American, and I liked what he said. Okay, Kennedy Deed of Gift, 1995. I finally was approved to study the original autopsy materials by Professor Burke Marshall, acting on behalf of the Kennedy family. Since cameras and other recording devices were not permitted, I had to prepare materials from artifacts I already had in order to make valid comparisons. Using my purported autopsy artifacts as the master comparative material, I prepared stereo transparencies from the image processing of the X-rays. These stereos would allow me to look in the third dimension using special stereo glasses that I designed for the task at the archives. This would allow a real-time comparison to the originals in the archives and hopefully allow me to validate my findings with just one trip to Washington, D.C. I also prepared transparencies of all purported autopsy photographs that were processed and had them to compare with the original photographs. I prepared a list of all materials I would take to the archives for the validation. I have, for my preparation records, videotapes of all transparency preparation, as well as grayscale comparison charts and optical lens to identify various gray levels of the original artifacts. I gave a complete list of all the materials I used for verification to Mr. Tilley at the archive, and he probably still has them. In 1995, September, 3 years ago, I can hardly believe it, was my inspection of the Deed of Gift original artifacts. I spent 2 days at the archives. Mr. Tilley was most gracious and permitted me complete access to all of the original artifacts located within the Deed of Gift. These originals have been guarded, and only qualified individuals have been allowed access over the years. Because I had the results of extensive scientific testing on my purported autopsy X-rays and photographs with me, I first made a comparison study. I was able to determine that my purported materials were in fact copies of some of the originals I was viewing. With that validation, I then had a wealth of analyses to compare my findings with the originals. It was not necessary to copy the originals for analyses. They were one and the same, and I had already documented my findings. There were also X-rays and photographs that I had never seen before. Photographs depicting in clear graphic detail the entrance wound in the right front temporal area and a massive exit wound in the right rear occipital area. Some photographs reveal non-human materials placed within the cadaver to hide wounds when the photographs were taken. Images were also altered on the original photographs before they were copied and put in the archives. I saw materials on enhanced X-rays used to add artifacts within the image and evidence of the ordered alteration of X-rays by my witness, Mr. Custer. Most importantly, I was able to provide authentication of his testimony in our affidavit. I have a fully detailed original workbook in which I transcribed manually all of my observations of each of the original artifacts I was shown. All initials and identity markings were meticulously copied, and all findings measured, detailed, and recorded for future comparison with other artifacts and records. These very detailed observations have allowed me to make concise comparison with the documents exhibit used for the Assassination Records Review Board autopsy and medical depositions released in July 1998. In 1996, I had all my accumulated documents to date correlated. This correlation was comprised of witness testimony released from previous government investigations, Warren Commission reports, HSCA reports, and my findings from image processing analyses. A presentation of my evidence was prepared and will be used in a 2-day detailed review of all of my records, artifacts, and documents when the proper government agency will take possession and treated as evidence in an unsolved murder. This presentation is similar to the one I proposed to give the Assassination Records Review Board in Dallas, Texas on March 30th and 31st, 1998. Your board advised me by letter on February 3rd, 1998 that limited resources and time precluded a presentation in Dallas. I also have a complete chronology of my documented requests for help in bringing my evidence to the proper government agency. The request to 196 government agencies, including past and present government officials, resulted in only one opinion on how to do this. The United States Senate Select Committee on Ethics stated in a letter to me dated August 26, 1997, quote, "It appears that your August 14, 1997 letter to the review board addresses the appropriate body for consideration of your concerns," unquote. One other ray of hope was a letter to me from Senator Ted Kennedy regarding the board's mandate and dated November 3, 1997. It stated in part, quote, "We hope that the disclosure will make a worthwhile contribution to the current debate," unquote. As an aside, I'm not going to leave this today, but I have an 8-page document of everybody I contacted, all 196 people, what my letter said, and all the documentation of the replies. And I can assure you that when you look at this documentation, which is this thick, you're going to say to yourself, particularly being in the business that you have for the last few years, how in the world could some of these elected officials answer your request for help in this manner? It is a tragedy. It's a travesty. It's taken a terrible toll on my life. But this is also an archival record that I have of exactly what happened when our public officials are asked to help. Now I have a comment on the Assassination Records Review Board staff report to accompany the July release of medical and autopsy records. Again, I want to thank you for having me here. Please understand that what I'm saying here is what I believe, what I found. It's not a reflection on you as an individual. And I'm just going to tell you the way I see it.
Go ahead.
With Tom Wilson, what you see is what you get.
Okay.
I fully agree that the shroud of secrecy around the JFK autopsy and records that existed prior to the formation of the Assassination Records Review Board has caused much suspicion in the minds of most Americans. I also agree when you state that an improper chain of evidence of autopsy materials is a shortcoming in the disposition of the past evidence. Then why would you not agree to treat my autopsy materials as chain of evidence, help me give them to the proper government agency, and put them in the JFK Act to complete the record? You state the JFK Act authorizes the review board to pursue issues related to the documentary record, and that Congressman Louis Stokes, former chairman of the House Select Committee on Assassination, strongly encouraged the review board to do what it could to help resolve issues surrounding the documentation of the autopsy. I would request that you inform Congressman Stokes of the information I gave you today. My documents fully disclose what happened at the autopsy and shortly thereafter. I believe the records you have originated in your release of the depositions confuses the issue, not resolves it. The 30-year paper trail you say hampered pursuit of additional records related to medical evidence and autopsy in reality ended when the artifacts were put in the archives as the Kennedy deed of gift originated. I believe I've shown you today the images of the president's real wounds have been there all this time. The paper trail was nothing more than a smokescreen. Why are the autopsy photographs and x-rays exempt from public disclosure when they are the only records relevant to the truth? When the board requested public guidance on 36 CFR Part 1400, I sent the board a letter dated February 13, 1995, detailing areas that would be a problem. In part I said, quote, "There are many loopholes in the Assassination Records Review Board guidance. Unless you provide a safeguard, 5 areas in the guidance, will be used to thwart your mandate. From what I see of the medical and autopsy records you just released, the mandate is already thwarted." I strongly oppose the implication in your report that digitizing the original autopsy photographs, and I assume you mean the x-rays also, on the best digital scanner in the world will allow further enhancement as technology and science advance. What you have really accomplished is similar to making the back of the president's head darker, as in the Mormon photographs shown all over the world. Yes, as you point out in subnote 2, quote, trained medical personnel will possibly be able to provide additional illuminating explanations regarding the autopsy after examining the enhanced images, end quote. Yes, the new enhancement will make the image more palatable to the eye. It will allow the eye and the brain to see and formulate many more different things, thus confusing the issue even more. Review the comments the medical personnel made when they looked at the same autopsy x-rays and photographs that I did. Image processing is the only way to analyze the autopsy photographs and x-rays. The technology future you refer to is now. I want you to have what I completed over many analyses. How can you submit a final report when the answers to questions you have been pursuing for years are incomplete? My records answer the questions and provide the proof. I fail to understand when the report says that although you were not required by the JFK Act to prepare and take the medical and autopsy depositions, you did so to complete the record. I have been telling you for years that I could complete the record with my evidence, yet the answer to me is the work of the review board does not constitute an investigation into the assassination. I have always said I have records, artifacts, and documents that classify as evidence. Surely this evidence must be reviewed by the board to complete the record. I also believe the questioning in the depositions was leading, not conducted in a professional manner, and did prejudge the evidence and the witnesses. I have shown you today how faded memories can be verified or refuted with the proper expertise and technology. Faded memories are not a viable excuse not to complete your mandate. I have weighed all of the evidence as you recommend. My most reliable witnesses are images frozen in time. They are not subject to memory loss, but some of them have been altered to impede the truth. You finalize your report by saying, quote, it would be more prudent to weigh all the evidence with due concern for human error rather than take single statements as proof for one theory or another, end quote. I have not taken single statements as proof for one theory or another. I have no theories, I only have proof. I request that you inform all of the board members of my disclosures today. I will leave a copy of my presentation with you. I believe you have an obligation to all the good American citizens that serve on the board to let each of them read this presentation. If they choose to ignore the evidence, then history will be the final judge. All the preceding efforts to convince the American people they have been told the truth in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy have failed. As an aside, I'd like to just give you a little bit of information of some other artifacts I have. Up until this last page, you'll notice I have never said the name Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald is not the man that fired the fatal headshot to President John F. Kennedy. He could not, he did not, and I can prove that. Some of the archival photographs that I have analyzed, but I cannot specify their authenticity, but I can tell you I still have them, and I have analyzed them. Some of them were given to me by Oliver Stone and his organization. I worked on a consultant for Mr. Stone. I imaged some archival video camera images for authenticity for him as far as what the images showed, clothing, some of the clothing you see on the shooter, this sort of thing. I did that as a paid professional only for evaluating of the images. I have no other thing to say about his program. But what I do have that were sent to me are images that definitely show that there are radios in people's pockets in Dealey Plaza. There are cameras being used in Dealey Plaza, and in the assassination scene there are cameras being used. There are two windows in the 6th floor depository building, the 6th floor so-called sniper's window and the floor at the opposite end of the building. I can tell you unequivocally that if the photos are genuine and if they are authenticated, the man in the sniper's window at the time of the assassination is not Lee Harvey Oswald. His features you can see. You can see what the man is wearing and what he looks like. I have those also. So that's all I can say, but I do have these and I will give these to the archives. I have a statement from Mr. Stone that I can use these in any way, shape, or form I want to. In closing, I would like to read to you the cover of my 8-page report detailing my attempts to get assistance from 196 government agencies and officials to do what I believe your mandate permits you to do. Thomas Wilson, a private citizen, has attempted to bring hard evidence in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy to the government of the United States. This evidence started with an accidental finding in 1988. Using state-of-the-art technology from 1988 to 1996, the evidence consisting of records, artifacts, and documents was compiled in a scientific and chain-of-custody manner. It proves that the government's explanation of the assassination was and is in error. In 1996, Marina Oswald Porter, the widow of Lee Harvey Oswald, the accused assassin, and I wrote to President Clinton requesting his help in bringing the truth to the American public. The road to the truth since then is described in an overview within the following 8 pages. Each of the events in the overview is backed up with formal written documentation. Of the several hundred combined government agencies and individuals contacted, only a few have attempted to help without success. As of August 1998, the government has not yet allowed this evidence to be received formally and by the proper government agency. In September 1998, the Assassination Records Review Board will submit its final report to the President. If this report is accepted without my substantial hard evidence included in the report, the Assassination Record Review Board mandate will not be fulfilled, and the American public will still question our government's integrity in obtaining about the truth about President John F. Kennedy's assassination. And I thank you for allowing me to be here today and present my materials in an overview fashion. I still have hundreds and hundreds of documents, artifacts, videos, raw videos, technical information. I am willing to give it all to you, but I have to have insistence that a government agency will take it, treat it as chain of custody, and then I'm off the hook. That's the best way I can say it. I'm a concerned citizen. I've spent 8, now 10 years of my life. It has been very hard on my wife. And I please ask for your help. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today.
Can I try to get you to better define for us the conditions under which you would donate all of your records? Do you want assurances that a law enforcement agency will study them before you would give the records to the JFK collection? Or do you want the law enforcement agency to take action, and then when they're finished taking action, they would donate it to the JFK collection? I'm a little confused.
All right. My intent, and this is why I've tried to solicit various senators, and up until today, Senator Specter has been the only one that has been able to try to assist me and act as an intermediary between myself and you. And there never was any malicious intent. It was just a matter of the evidence. So to answer your question, Mr. Warren, if it could be arranged that, let's say, theoretically, Senator Specter or the board set up a meeting with the FBI, which I'm still trying to do myself, but I have a letter that they will meet with me. But what I want to do is just have a government agency, and let's assume it's the FBI or the Justice Department, review my 2-day bit of evidence that I have detailing everything I have. Once they detail that, I would like to put it in boxes, give it to the archives to guard it, yet make sure, as in the Kennedy deed of gift, that the proper government agency can evaluate it, and then it will all be disposed of. And they might, whatever they're finding, they might say, just like what's going on today, you know. They might say, this person is a fake, what he has is no good. they might say, well, here's evidence and we can correlate it and we can authorize it. Now we're on the trail of a murderer. We're going to use this as evidence. But in any event, I want it to be made public. I don't want it to be secured for years while a study is made. I will even help a government agency authenticate it. I volunteer this. The government hasn't spent 1 cent on me trying to bring this to the truth. And then I really want you folks who have, I believe you've done a very honorable job. I want you to have it. And I want the American people, long after I'm not here, to see how the truth did come out. I think this, basically these last 2 hours, you see, when I came down here, I really believe what I have. I've done that thorough job. I have nothing to gain from this, nothing. And I'm seeking your help even though you only have a few weeks to go.
Can I ask you to explain in some more detail for me what you call trigonometric calculations of where the shot came from? Did you do a reenactment, or did you, with pupils,
no.
Did you do trigonometry?
If you go back into the past investigations, there have been several technical people get in front of people that are not technical and use words like photogrammetry. I just abhor that. Because what it does is it takes somebody that may have a lot of expertise and puts them on the defensive. I'm not saying you're doing that now. To answer your questions, what I did is I had these Zapruder, Nixon, Mormon photographs. So, and I also had information detailing where they were supposedly located during the scene. Then what I had to do is I had, and this is fully documented in several records and videos that I had to go back and put targets, and I actually glued targets on the wall directly in front of where Mr. Gordon Arnold was standing. This is the cornerstone at the top of the steps.
I'm familiar with him.
Okay, and the people that were helping me, unfortunately, were my wife and my son. My wife was standing in the middle of Dealey Plaza with a pie plate with a reflector on the front that I had designed. And so what I did is I triangulated the video images of where these folks were standing. Now I know exactly where the shooter is from the Mormon photograph. I know exactly where Mary Mormon was because even though some of the telephone and lighting poles and so forth had been moved, I was able to get all that information. So from many angles, for instance, Zapruder and Mary Mormon are 180 degrees apart. The Nix photo is a little bit back behind the Mormon photo. So I had enough information to intersect these triangles by using targets. Then the computer did all of the angling. So there was a mathematical map and the data behind to make sure. And what happened was, whenever I was able to find out that President Kennedy could not be in the spot, because you see, up until this time I had always assumed the shooter I found is the one that fired the headshot. And yet the triangulation, the angular of the physical testing, not a reenactment. You can't reenact it. You can't. But what you can do is target these concrete structures, the sewer, the street, even though it's been altered. And all these things are still there. Some of the trees are even there. And that's what able to be to determine. And it proved to me, which was very confusing, that President Kennedy was in the motorcade here, and when the man shot, he was here. This was, I thought something was drastically wrong. And that's why I had to go back through the work.
Are you saying, in other words, that a Mormon photograph does not equate with frame 313?
No.
Sorry, I withdraw that question.
No, let me think what you're saying. This is a very complex subject. What I'm saying is that when I assumed that the shooter was shooting the final headshot, Mary Mormon could not be where she physically is, where President Kennedy can't be where he physically is.
Doesn't equate with the figure.
No, and Mr. Zapruder, which is the data point of the film, he couldn't possibly because President Kennedy hadn't got there yet.
And so when you say triangulation, do you mean it's the equivalent of a navigational fix? Where
Absolutely.
three lines come together.
Just as good as what they're
Okay.
doing today.
I understand that now, okay.
I want to tell you, this is an azimuth fixation.
Okay.
This is up to date with the latest technology and maybe even a little bit further.
Okay, and then my last question, would it be fair to say that your conclusion that the source of this headshot was from the storm drain came from connecting the two dots of the entry wound and the center of the exit or whatever, and drawing a line forward to where it led?
It's a fair statement to say that the clarity of the original Mormon copy made right after the Mormon was photographed by the detail in it, and allowed me to examine the actual flow of forces within the skull of President Kennedy. The flow of forces are like a big cave with all the deformations, and as you can see, notice in your medical testimony that they talk about the abrasions, and they talk about the way the skull was fractured and the beveling. Well, all of the beveling proves that it was from in to out. So by going back down through the one empty skull photograph that you saw in there where nobody could even orient it?
Correct, yes, I remember.
Where you think an entry hole is not it. That's a piece of tissue, but the entry hole is there. Anyhow, with all those other photographs, I was able to converge through data, and then it's just a matter of angling. And you see, I realize this is very confusing, because when I saw that it was coming out of the street, I said, Tom, you're all wet. This cannot be. And I made the details, and then I went back to Dallas and actually walked at the site, and where is exactly the point where the origin of the firing came? The sewer.
Okay, so all of your data that you're summarizing for me now is in this two-day presentation and available for study by others?
It's evaluate, and it lists everything I have. And I believe me, I didn't want to take your time up. I have hundreds of documents authenticating every finding, including the Oswald famous backyard shot. That's a fake. I can do that. It's an absolute fake. I have a documentation showing where I even had to go and use the azimuth of the sun on the reflection on the shoes and the person holding the gun to prove that he couldn't be in the backyard on that day. I've solicited many, many files from the FBI and the archives, the Truth and Information Act. I've gotten nothing but the unaround. I wanted to get Mr. Schoenfeld's records, because Mr. Schoenfeld, as far as I can tell, he probably did an honorable job, but I hardly dispute what he says he used as evidence. So how could the Warren Commission, how could the medical, with some of the things they were shown an elephant, and they're really looking at an orange.
Do you have a list of the materials you're turning over to the board today?
I would like to read here. I'm going to give you three things.
Okay.
I'm going to give you Mr. Custer's audio tape that lasts 20 minutes.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the Atom book that I showed you with all of the images in it. And I'm going to give you a total copy of what I presented today, with the exception of some of the things I've made off the cuff to you. I cannot give you the video because the video, in my opinion, at this time is very relevant to the overview of the evidence. And this is the type of video I would like to show some governmental agency that would hopefully pursue it. So if you would just give me a signed receipt for this, I would appreciate it.
Why don't I go get that now?
Okay.
Thank you very much. I thank you for coming.
Okay.
I just want to make one final statement.
Sure.
I honestly don't know, and I'm not an attorney. I don't know yet what we'll do with exhibits to our depositions that are copyrighted. There are some others too.
I understand.
And you made your feelings clear, and I think they'll have to be examined by our chief counsel and our executive director.
Let me say this about that. I didn't say I wouldn't give permission. I just think it was done wrongly, okay? I'm willing to work with you. Please make sure that your board members see what I believe the board must know this before you sunset.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go ahead and stop.
And I'll be back with the receipt.
I will copy the
enough for me, Doug.
You know, I've never received a subpoena, but I'm sure it's intimidating and a little bit scary. And
Well, I actually, when I talked to Mr. Marwolf, I was soliciting, I was ready for him to give me one. I mean, I was waiting.
you wanted one.
I wanted one. I mean, I'm ready to come down. And then he goes to the Holocaust Museum. And then I wrote a letter to Jeremy Gunn. I want to see Jeremy Gunn, you know, and then he leaves. You know what's amazing to me is that after all this money that's been expended and all the people involved, if this were an industrial job I was working on, and the man that started it left right before I gave my final report, he'd be fired from everything. It's just bad. I firmly believe you want to do a good job. I know. I really need some help.
Whether it was good or bad or indifferent, believe it or not, I did not examine your 3 interview transcripts before the deposition. It was too late. I wanted to get Jerrol Custer feeling comfortable, at least with me, and calming down a little. So we chatted for about an hour and a half in his hotel room. By the time I got home, it was 10 p.m., and I did not look at those beforehand. So if there was something I should have gleaned from them and used, I failed because I didn't have time to look at it.
Doug, I only said the potential existed. I'm not.
Right.
And as I said, that tape was totally unedited. I didn't.
Yeah.
Jerry, you know, we were just sitting there.
Oh, that's Jerry, all right. He'll say whatever's
Yeah, it wasn't a fake, was it?
No.
I just need some help. I need help desperately.
We did that. I'm the one that lobbied endlessly to get him and the other fellow Reed interviewed and deposed. I was particularly upset that nobody in the government had interviewed Jerrol Custer before. And the House committee interviewed Reed on the phone. That's not adequate either.
No. Doug,
You know.
personal note from me to you. Don't become a scapegoat. You're the only one that started this. I've been in a lot of industrial bureaucracies and backstab. Don't protect yourself. Okay.
My 3 years there have been long. It's been a long 3 years. It's been difficult at times. That's all I'll say right now.
I understand. And the other thing is that I can't believe that Congressman Stokes, I mean, they initiated this. Senator Specter even wanted to have a second bill authorizing this. You said that you had a slow start, and I can believe that. You spent a lot of money. I understand that. But if you can understand why I'm talking about when you digitize these photos that you really didn't do any, look at the Life magazine and...
I'll have some more to say about that
Okay.
when we shut down about the Rochester event.
If you
It
can
was
just-
interesting, but limited in the scope of what it could accomplish.
The other thing is if you can at least make sure that the board and the proper people know about my presentation. That's all I want. So that no one can say, oh, we didn't know about this
We
guy.
have a chapter in the final report on private donations. I will do all I can to make sure that we put something in that chapter on what you've done today.
I appreciate it.
I think when we spoke to you earlier, we thought that it might have been finished by the time you got here. It's not finished yet. It's in final edit, but I will do all I can, and I hope I can succeed in trying to get proper mention made of your presentation, and on your desires. You know.
And I can assure you, my wife said, you mean you're going to give them the computer? I mean, this is not a cheap computer. Absolutely. I want to get on with some...
What brand is it? Is it a Unix or a Sun?
I'm not going to tell
Oh,
you,
okay.
but I want to tell you it's equal to or better than any of them.
Okay.
10 years ago, it was the ultimate.
Well, I saw some neat computers at Kodak up at Rochester.
Yeah, I'm a little bit wondering about the Kodak in
Yeah.
Rochester.
Yeah, they had some nice computers.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you, the other thing is the technology to do all this so-called photo alteration that was done way back, all that stuff existed, you know, I mean. I have tons and tons of detail, but you see, that's not the important, that's not where I'm coming from. I hope that somebody, I don't want our future kids to, I want them to have an American. You know, I want them to believe in their government.
Well, that's why there's a review board, because there are credibility questions about the government, and that's why we...
Yeah, but
I know.
anyhow.
Let me ask you a question. Do you accept because I've never known what to think. Do you accept the angles of tilt, right and left tilt and up and down tilt that Kennedy's head that the House committee came up with? Because
No.
that's kind of central to your
No,
work.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the back shot. I didn't even talk about the back shot.
Yeah,
I was
know.
able to measure the clothing. I looked under the lapels the whole bit while I was there. And what's interesting is you'll notice I never went back after 2 days. This is how apparent everything was. So when you look at the triangulation now, photogrammetry, whatever you want to call it, of the back shot, okay, it could not have come from the 6th-floor window. It could not have. It is physical. And I can dispute all that. I have all that too, you see. Now the FBI, I tried to see the FBI in Dallas when I was there, when I said I would give you the 2-day presentation. And I got a little bit of a runaround, but ultimately they said they would see me, but then that was 2 days after I left. So I now, I mean, this 8 pages of, oh, you wouldn't believe it. Some of the people that are in the papers today, I have letters from. That are in the papers today.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, it is interesting, and you know, a lot of people can be embarrassed, and this is why, before I go public or do what I have to do to get rid of this thing, I want to make sure that the people that I'm going to accuse with evidence, that they really were aware of what was going on and not just some subgroup, okay? And that's why I tried to reach the board, not having met you or anything. My personal opinion is way back when in the other investigations, the Warren Commission, the House Select Committee, and particularly the medical panel, wow. I think they were shown a bill of goods. Because I know some of the individuals, they're sharp people, they were hoodwinked. And I can't believe they don't know they were hoodwinked either. Okay? Some of them knew and haven't said anything.
Well, they flew in on airplanes and met briefly and got awfully confused and then left. There's a researcher out there who called it a 3-ring circus, some of their sessions. I won't agree or disagree with that, but Wallace Milam, you know, that's what he called it.
You know, over the last 6 years, I've learned one thing. I went into this very naive. I believed people that were trying to bring the truth out, not trying to make a buck and so forth. And now you see, I'm totally alone. I have one person that's been a friend, and that's Rick. I've talked things over with him. Rick doesn't even know what I have. But he's been honest and above board with me. He's interested. But I have no other allies now, and I know them all of them, personally.
Could I pose a quick question to Doug? And again, I think this thing is still running.
I gotta be careful.
Right, so, you know.
Sure.
We're not supposed to make comments on evidence or...
Right, well, so if you feel uncomfortable or don't feel this is the time to answer it, then I definitely understand. But I was privy to the fact that Mr. Wilson did have access to the formal deed of gift of the archives. And what was apparent to me in his subsequent conversations about what he's